The other animals are largely to do with the dark side. It's nice and it's friendly, and it's probably mostly true that people in the creative industry and creative networks are very nice people, very benign, sharing, mutual, convivial people. But that's not always the case. I mean, I think one of the nice correctives in this book, and I can't claim that much credit for it, is the chapter on Don't Get Ripped Off, when we look at things like IP and copyright and that whole sort of world of contracts and using protection. Because there are sharks out there, there are snakes out there, you know, not everything is rosy in the garden, or it would be the sea, wasn't it, if there's sharks. So there are other animals in this book. So what I thought I would do then is to just very simply go through some of the sort of milestones in this book, sort of chapter by chapter. The first chapter is called Selling Your Soul. Possibly not for everyone, but I think for a lot of people in the creative industries, there is going to be a tension. There is going to be a tension between your creative inspiration, your creative motivation, the thing that is your baby, and business and money. Now, I don't think that's necessarily something that's insurmountable and overcomable. But it's something to consider, and it's something to consider in, you know, make a decision about where you want to be in that world. Do you want to sell your soul or not? Lots and lots of people have come on our conference days and short courses and NAs at Trent, and they come as a result of success. They come as a result of being successful in business for the last 5 or 10 years, because they want somebody to give them permission to think sideways, to think creatively, because they become successful in business and they've turned into an accountant or a personnel manager, and that's not really what they set out to do. So there is that potential tension when we think about the relationship between creativity and industry, it seems to me. So there's stuff in the book that sort of asks those questions rather than arrives at any answer, because I don't think anyone like me can give you the answer. It's just questions, I think, really, apart from anything else. One of the little games around that is this thing called the line of badness. And I didn't invent this. I sort of borrowed this from a company called Introversion. We're a sort of games development company, and they do this sort of once a week, once a month. You know, there's a line of badness between the good and the bad. Now they might, you know, they want to arrive at an optimum position. Sometimes they do stuff for the money. They don't particularly want to work with this client, but they do it because it's, you know, it's good money, it's big money. So they sort of that takes them in the sort of what they would consider bad direction. So then they would recognise that, and maybe they would, well, okay, well, we'll do something for free next week. We will do something pro bono next week, just to sort of be conscious of where they're situated along this line of badness. I think it's another example of the ecological metaphor, because it's asking you to think about migration. It's asking you to think about where you're moving along this line, and the whole sort of migration metaphor it seems to make sense in terms of that. The book on this asks you to think about finding a business compass. Now that might mean friends and colleagues or family, and just running by them every so often. Is this what I really set out to do? Can you remind me what it was I originally said I was going to do in this world? Am I getting sucked into things that I didn't set out to do? So in that chapter, he just plays around with those sorts of ideas and asks you those questions about selling your soul. The second chapter is called How to Make Friends and Influence People, which is largely the sort of nitty-gritty of what networks are and how networks operate, and sort of an anatomy of networks, and what they sort of feel like, and how you would perhaps be best dealing with them in a sort of professional way. Again, pursuing the biological metaphor, and borrowing this from biology, essentially. High-level theoretical biology this is now. I talk about this notion of autopoiesis. Auto as in self, poiesis as in the making of. I think it's, again, something that's very different about the creativism, and possibly this room, is that these networks don't happen as a result of some external decision that a manager or an organisation makes. They make themselves. They're only effective, it seems to me, or they're more effective if they make themselves. And the people who take part in it are also the people who make it at the same time, which is what autopoiesis essentially is about. Theoretical biologists in the 1960s tried to work out where the biological cell comes from. How does this thing happen? Where does it come from? And apparently what they found is there's the nucleus, the mitochondria, or whatever else, DNA. I'm no biologist. And what they found is there's lots of chemical communications, there's lots of chemical processes going on all the time within the cell, right? And it's those processes which actually make the cell boundary. So the processes make the structure. But at the same time, simultaneously, the processes can't take place unless the structure is there. So simultaneously, the processes make the structure, and the structure allows the processes. Now, as a biological metaphor, I think that's quite interesting, because you apply that to this space here. It seems to me you people coming together and talking to each other, i.e. processes, communication, make something recognizable for people to come into, the structure. And when people come into that structure, the thing that you've set up, you get more processes. So I think understanding networks and what networks are and thinking about how you engage with them, I think it's important to see how these things are self-organised. Rather than waiting for somebody to organise them for you, you have responsibilities to make them happen for yourself internally. They emerge out of themselves rather than being a sort of a managerial plan by some sort of institution. And I think that brings the possibility of a sense of freedom, the possibility of a sense of a more authentic engagement with each other, right? Rather than this being your job. This is something that we tend to be, it's almost like what we are rather than what we do, I think. So that's that sort of stuff. There's obviously a lot of other things going on in that chapter. The third chapter is called Who Do I Get Into Bed With? Because again, I think one of the key differences between creative industries and other industries, and I think this is a good example, is the high level of collaboration that goes on. Collaboration between people, or collaboration between different disciplines, different people coming from lots of different angles. So thinking about how you understand that, and possibly how you begin to manage that collaborativeness, it seems to me is another new question. The chapter starts with a little story called I Really Love You, but ... Stage one, you spend all your time and energy finding someone really attractive. Stage two, you go on a couple of dates with them, and you know it's going well. You find out they find you really attractive back, and so it sounds like you might be in a relationship. Stage three, you spend all your time trying to turn each other into someone else. And stage four, the relationship ends, so you spend all your time looking for someone really attractive. So I think having a sensitive management of that collaborative space and not trying to turn each other into someone else and accepting it for what it is and finding mutual value rather than just value for yourself, it seems to me is a really key skill.